Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi and senior political reporter for CNN, Manu Raju.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you for having me. Thank you for being here, Speaker Pelosi.
My pleasure.
And as I was saying to you backstage, congratulations on the Warriors making it to Game 6 of the NBA Finals. Sorry about Kevin Durant's injury, which was a very grisly injury. Hope he's okay. Before we get into the issues of the conference, I do want to talk about some of the issues that have been in the news over the past week. You were traveling abroad, and you were in Normandy. The president was in Normandy too, and he made some comments about you. He was sitting in the American cemetery in Normandy, and probably the most aggressive remarks I've heard from a president make about a Speaker of the House. He said that you were nervous. He called you a disaster. He also called you a nasty, vindictive, horrible person. This is not me. This is the president saying this. He later went on to tweet that you were a disgrace to yourself and your family. So, I mean, how do you react to the President of the United States calling you, the Speaker of the House, insulting you like that?
Well, what bothers me more is that we're talking about that instead of how to reduce the national debt. Let's just say this. We were in Normandy, and that morning, before the president made his statement, I was being interviewed by MSNBC, and they asked me about the president, and I said, we're here about our veterans, and I have a rule for any Codels, and you can ask anyone, Democratic or Republican, always say the first rule of our Codel is we never criticize a president of the United States when we are overseas. That we just don't do that. We have plenty of time to do that back home, but when we travel, we don't, and especially when we're here to honor the courage of our veterans and thank them for that courage, and also to salute the cooperation and collaboration of our country with our allies in the greatest naval invasion in the history of the world to save civilization as we know it today and our freedoms. So I said, basically, I'm not here to say anything about the president. And we had the same backdrop, the tombstones of our veterans who are buried in Normandy. The president took a different tact. I don't think.
But how do you work with?
I'm done with him. I don't even want to talk about it.
But how do you work? I mean, you have to work with them. How do you work with them after he levels such an insult against you overseas?
I just consider the source.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, my stock goes up every time he attacks me. So what can I say? But let's not spend too much time on that because that's his victory. The diverter in chief, the diverter of attention in chief. You know, we'll talk about this instead of talking about the fact that the president his behavior in terms of tariffs and trade and all the issues in terms of what we need to do for our country to solve some of the challenges that we face. Infrastructure. We thought that we had a working relationship with him on that. He's always talked about infrastructure as a priority, and I believed him in that regard. But when it came time to pay for it, he diverted attention to personal nastiness. But you know, again, that's not the point. It's a waste of time.
But he was apparently set off by remarks you reportedly made in private, saying that you'd rather see him in prison than impeached. Is that how you really feel?
I don't care what motivates him, and we never know. But in front of the tombstones of our fallen, when we're there to observe the 75th anniversary of Normandy, you be the judge as to whether you think it's appropriate for the president to take that tack. That's all I'm going to say about it. I don't care what you ask anymore. I'm not going to talk about him anymore.
But I want to know, did you actually say that? Did you actually say that the president, you would rather see him in prison than
when we have conversations in our caucus, they stay in our caucus. Do people think that there's some impeachable offenses that the president committed? Yes. How serious are they? Are they criminal? Many people think they are.
Do you think they are?
But that's not I'm here to talk about.
And we will get into that. I promise you.
I'm not going to that place of what happens within our caucus. What we're talking about is what's happening within our country, about how we go forward with investments in the future to educate a workforce for the 21st century, workforce development essential to infrastructure development. Our For the People agenda. For the people. That was what we ran on. That's what we are delivering. For the people, healthcare, with lowering the cost of health care by lowering the cost of prescription drugs and guaranteeing and strengthening the pre-existing condition benefit. Lowering health care costs, bigger paychecks by building infrastructure of America in a green way for the future, and cleaner government. H.R. 1 to stop it. We won the Congress, a 40-seat net gain in the Congress, in the most gerrymandered, voter-suppressed political arena in history, and yet we won 40 seats. But that's not right. We have to end the voter suppression, have people choosing their representatives rather than representatives choosing their constituents through partisan gerrymandering. So that is our agenda. That's the bills that we are passing, and we want the Senate to pick up some of the legislation and go forward in terms of the Dreamers, the Equality Act, LGBTQ. As we begin Gay Pride Week, we passed a couple weeks ago the Equality Act, which ends discrimination against the LGBTQ community. The Dreamers, the gold standard of immigrants to our country, these lovely young people who, through no fault of their own, they didn't make the decision to come here. They contribute so much to our military, to our teaching force in our country, to health care, all the rest. And the list goes on. Equal pay for equal work for women, Violence Against Women Act, the list goes on and on. Gun violence prevention, and the rest.
You talk a lot, though, about legislating and investigating as part of the priority. If I can finish my question.
No, wait a minute. Legislating, investigating, litigating. I want you to add the litigating.
Okay, litigating, I'm glad you mentioned that, because one argument that people are making in your caucus is that opening up an impeachment inquiry would strengthen your case in court. So why are you against an impeachment inquiry?
Well, is that true?
Some people argue that.
I just finished that. But we have to, that's a question to be asked. If you open an impeachment inquiry, do you get more information? You still end up in the court. So if you want to go down that path, and I'm glad you asked that question. So if you want to talk about that, I thought we were talking about and reducing the.
No, we'll get there.
But in any event, this is very important to our country as to who we are. We have a situation where the Russians, by all accounts, with full confidence of our intelligence community, made an assault on our election, an attack on our democracy. The President of the United States calls it a hoax. The President of the United States sides with Putin and not with our intelligence. We must pass legislation to make sure they cannot do it again. And according to the FBI, 24/7, they are working to do it again. So we have to protect our democracy with what we do. And at the same time, we have to see what happened in all of that. And the question, and that's a good question that you asked, Manu, do you get more information by having an inquiry than if you just have investigations? Well, I don't have a straight answer on that, but even if you could, you can't do it without going to the courts. And I maintain that to go to the courts, we have to have the strongest possible case, ironclad. We've won in the courts on the couple of the things that Mr. Cummings has put forth. Mazer, the president's accounting firm, they should release their documents. On the Deutsche Bank, Maxine Waters case, we won that case in court. Of course, they'll appeal because they want to obstruct the American people from having the truth. So the question you ask, do we get more by having an inquiry? Some say yes, some say no.
If a majority of your caucus, wants to go forward with an impeachment inquiry, would you go for it?
It's not even close in our caucus about
But eventually,
well, you know what? Why are we speculating on hypotheticals? What we're doing is winning in court. We won a victory, getting the documents from the Justice Department today, for fear of further going to court. Although we're still going to hold the Attorney General in contempt today, and then the path that we're on is a path that I think. Look, I want to tell you something.
You said you're not a path.
Nothing as divisive in our country, on my view, than impeachment. Our founders gave us so much to be grateful for. They were a blessing intellectually in values and all the rest. Thank God they made our Constitution amendable. They had that wisdom as well. But they gave us guidance in this way. They said, e pluribus unum. from many one. They couldn't imagine how many we would become or how different we would be from each other, but they knew we had to be one. So we're trying to make decisions as we go forth that are unifying, not dividing.
Because
Infrastructure, the president says he wants to do that. Lowering the cost of prescription drugs, the president says he wants to do that. Cleaner government, not so sure about that. But nonetheless, it is part of our agenda. And as we do that, we try to find as much common ground as possible while maintaining the boldest common denominator. Impeachment, if you're going down that path, you don't go to court with your weakest case as long as you keep getting more information to build your case.
Jerry Nadler
You
said
have a
last week.
responsibility to do that.
Last week, Jerry Nadler said that impeachment inquiry. It may come to that. You've said in the past you're not on that path to impeachment. Are you still? How do you reconcile those?
But
two
it's
statements?
not off the table. You can't. I don't think you should impeach for political reasons, and I don't think you should not impeach for political reasons. It's not about politics. It's not about Democrats and Republicans. It's not about partisanship. It's about patriotism to our country. It's upholding the Constitution of the United States. If, in fact, the executive branch can say, you can never have oversight over us, you have destroyed the system of checks and balances, which is the wisdom and the heart of our Constitution. And if you go down that path and you look to the Bill of Rights and the assaults that they make on the press, et cetera, then you are undermining the Constitution, not honoring your oath of office to support and defend. And part of all of that is, again, our responsibility, our oath of office. And what is appalling is the lack of respect for the oath of office that the Republicans in Congress, in the House, and in the Senate have for their own oath of office to strengthen the institution in which they serve. And it's not about Congress. It's about the American people. We are representatives of the American people who deserve to know the truth.
Before we move on to the other issues, very quickly though, but if you really believe the president may have committed crimes in office, isn't it your obligation to mount an impeachment inquiry?
My obligation is to do whatever we do in the most effective way possible.
And you believe he committed crimes in office?
I think it's the Mueller report very clearly spells out at least 10 or 11 instances of obstruction of justice. But I'm not here to have that discussion here. That's for the committees. We have 6 committees that work on this. One doing taxes, Ways and Means Committee, Maxine Waters, Financial Services, Jerry Nadler, Judiciary, Elijah Cummings, the Government Oversight Committee, Elliot Engel, Foreign Affairs Committee. They're all doing their work very well, and I believe in the committee system, and it will bubble up from there.
Another issue over the weekend was the president backing off his threat on tariffs on Mexico. He says that he deserves credit for forcing Mexico to take a tougher line on the immigration issue. Do you think the president?
If I had been invited to talk about the president, I would have.
But do you
had
think the president
more
deserves any
important
credit?
work to do at home.
But do you think the president deserves credit on tariffs?
Really? No. Everybody knows that those issues were, if they were agreed to, they were agreed to long before the president made the announcement, A, but they were designed to take your attention away from the Mueller report. Look at the timing. This all happened a while back, and even now the foreign minister of Mexico is saying that's not really, the way the president describes is not really the way, what we have agreed to. But the fact is that I come here each year very complimented to have the invitation of the Peterson family. Pete Peterson, to me, was a national hero. I loved him very much. He was the personification of the American dream, Greek-American family rising to the heights, Mount Olympus of the financial community in our country, always sensitive to the needs of working people, always teaching us that the increase in the national debt was a tax on our children and that we had to hold it in check and be creative in how we did it. And he always said to me, Nancy, keep your eye on the tax expenditures in the budget. So I feel very honored always to be invited to this.
I want to ask you a question about the budget and one.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, no, exactly. Okay, I'm sorry. We still have
Hallelujah.
time to talk about that. So,
No, but I will not be part of the diversionary tactics of the White House that
but there
you
is
are
a legislative
obviously akin to.
one big legislative issue on your plate is what to do about the U.S.-Mexico trade agreement. How do you pin the prospects of that passage of that if you were to gauge?
How did a policy issue slip in there?
We're going to get to it. I told you.
I originally thought that the U.S., Mexico, Canada, whatever we're calling it, NAFTA, after NAFTA, NAFTA 2.0, they have all the different names for it, but this current attempt at an agreement, I thought that would be the easiest trade bill we'd ever had the opportunity to pass, because those who are unhappy with NAFTA really want to have a new NAFTA, and that includes many people in the Democratic Party. I myself voted for NAFTA. I was disappointed in how it was implemented, but there were some winners and there were some losers, and there's no question about the fact that many people lost jobs in our country because of it. Many people gained jobs. It depends on where you are regionally, as trade usually is measured. It's frequently regional. So we have, what I met yesterday was Chairman Grassley. I don't know if that's news or if we did get our picture taken together, so maybe it's out there that we met with Senator Grassley and Ranking Member Brady, who was with you earlier, and Richie Neal, the corresponding, our chair of Ways and Means Committee. I think that has such a nice ring to it, Richie Neal, chair of the Ways and Means Committee. Anyway, we met, and our concerns are as follows. Overarching enforcement. You must have enforcement, or else you're just having a conversation. So if you don't have enforcement, you're just having NAFTA again with sprinkles on top or something, but you're not having a new NAFTA, because enforcement is very essential to implementing a trade agreement. Our three areas of concern under that overarching are workers' rights. What does it mean to America's working families? Secondly, environment. What does it mean in terms of the environment? Big disappointment, some of what happened with NAFTA in terms of the environment. And the third, which is a big concern in my caucus, is the how pharmaceutical drugs are treated in the agreement. More on the subject if you ask me, but those are the three areas. Now then, there are overarching three categories. If you don't have enforcement, it's no use even having the conversation on the other things. And then there's some what we call dogs and cats, different things from around the country, not to be considered anything but a compliment, because we all love our dogs and cats. But these are more parochial
Do you think
issues.
that has a chance? What do you think the chances are passage right now?
I've always, we're on a path, we want to be on a path to yes, but the big difference is if you say that you have enforcement because you passed a law in the U.S. to make sure we enforce it, that's not good. It has to be in the agreement. Now, we are studying some approaches, which I'm optimistic. Sherrod Brown and Ron Wyden have an approach that could be an answer to it, which would be acceptable to the administration and to the other to Mexico and to Canada.
So,
By the way, I saw the Prime Minister in Normandy, as I said to you earlier, and well, it would not have been appropriate to have a bet on the game in Normandy. As soon as we got home, we have a bet on the game.
On the issue of the debt, you have to raise the debt ceiling this year. You're also talking about raising budget caps. But right now the debt is at $22 trillion. How come dealing with the national debt in a serious way is not a bigger priority in this Congress?
Well, we had ask the Republicans who passed the biggest increase in the national debt with interest, $2 trillion addition to the national debt. And then they say it's going to pay for itself. Well, it isn't. Bruce Bartlett, the person who worked with Jack Kemp on supply side economics, he testified to us. I believe in supply side, but anybody who tells you that the tax cut's going to pay for himself, it's not true, it's nonsense, and he even used the full words of BS, the full words. This is an acolyte of supply side economics. So this is not it just took us to a terrible place, that 83% of the benefits could be for the top 1%. We all agreed that we wanted to make a change in the corporate rate, in terms of competitiveness and the rest. But what they did was so, and you can't do it. I mean, it's in the dark of night, the speed of light, no hearings. Now they're saying, help us fix this, help us fix that. Well, no, let's just, in a bipartisan way. We don't want to deal with it in a democratic way. We want to do it in a bipartisan way, because if you're going to have a tax plan that is sustainable, as the 86 was, whether you like it or not, it was bipartisan, took a long time to pass with hearings and the rest, with understanding the ramifications of it, and instead they go in the dark of night, speed of light, as I say. So that is the one thing that they did pass. Our H.R. 1 is cleaner government. Their H.R. 1 is tax breaks for the wealthiest people in our country, adding $2 trillion to the national debt.
But there are some things that in your caucus that people are pushing that could add significant amounts to the debt. Critics say Medicare for all, Medicare for all, and Green New Deal. Do you support those two plans specifically?
Everything is on the table to be reviewed. But what I do support is pay as you go. And I take some heat in my caucus for that. Pay as you go. This is something that we worked on since the 80s, when you could see that the Reagan budgets were, increasing defense spending, and it was engineering to reduce the domestic side. So pay as you go. George Miller of California introduced that as a congressman even before I was in Congress, and it was implemented when President Clinton became president, and even somewhat with President George Herbert Walker Bush, who was so courageous going to Andrews Air Force Base and engaging in the discussion and saying, I said during the campaign, read my lips, no new taxes, but who would I be as a person if I saw an opportunity for our country and didn't take advantage of it? God bless George Herbert Walker.
There's spending legislation on the floor and debate within your caucus about allowing the Hyde Amendment to continue to move forward, of course prohibiting federal funding for abortion services. Would you draw a red line and say the Hyde Amendment will not pass the House under your speakership?
What do you mean it will not pass? It's the law of the land.
Will you prevent it from moving forward in additional
No, I do not support the Hyde Amendment. I don't think it's good public policy, and I wish we never had a Hyde Amendment. But that is the law of the land right now, and I don't see that there's an opportunity to get rid of it with the current occupant of the White House and some in the United States Senate. But I do believe it's something that we have to get people ready for, that we have to get rid of that. But getting back to the deficit, when I send my members, the national debt, when I send my members to these meetings, the Biden, this eight, those different groups that they've had over time, I always say, our caucus, our values. You have no instruction except to be, and I'm agnostic, be agnostic. Put in the center of the table growth that creates good paying jobs, and then whatever solutions come forward, whether they're from the right or from the left, be open to them on what we can do together to reduce the debt as we create good paying jobs, increase the confidence of workers and that's what increasing paychecks, I see it directly related to addressing the budget.
We're running out of time. Just two quick things. In your caucus, there's a push.
Did you come to hear about some of this other stuff?
But in your caucus, there's a push for some of your members to prevent members from becoming lobbyists, lawmakers from becoming lobbyists. Would you support legislation to prevent lawmakers from eventually becoming lobbyists?
No, I don't even know what you're talking about. I mean,
some of your members have talked about it.
Well, I understand that, but I have 238 members, and they have the beautiful exuberance of all of these ideas, and they haven't really worked them through to a place where we're having any discussion about them. But if you want to talk about my members and how great they are, as I say to them, our diversity of opinion, of generationally, gender identity, ethnically, regionally, in every way, did I say geographically twice? Our diversity is our strength. And again, even of difference of opinion. Every view is valuable to us. Our diversity is our strength, but our unity is our power. And that is what the president fears most.
So, lastly, as we wrap up here, when you look back in period American history, how do you think that historians will eventually record this moment in American history?
Well, I think that what I say to my members is that at the time of our revolution, when the times were dark and this or that, Thomas Paine said, "The times have found us. Times have found us." And I think that the times have found us now. Not that we place ourselves in a category of greatness of our founders, but the sense of urgency of protecting our Constitution, protecting America. What is America? It is our Constitution and the freedoms contained therein. What is America? It's the people, a nation of immigrants by and large. The beautiful diversity of America. To value that. What is America? The great land mass from sea to shining sea and even beyond that God has given us that's being degraded. Undermine the Constitution, degrade the environment and the land, disrespect the people, undermine our values that are in a budget. Budget should be a statement of our national values. What is important to us as a nation should be demonstrated in how we allocate our resources, how we husband our resources in terms of investing as well as covering the cost of. And I do think the times have found us to make a very big difference in how we go forward. And part of what we want to do is in the most transparent way, so the public can see what the decisions are and how they're affected by them. The American people are affected by them. The most transparent way and the most bipartisan way. Responsibility to find common ground wherever we can, but to stand our ground like a rock. That was Thomas Jefferson speaking right there. Like a rock where we can't, but the boldest common denominator working together. Transparent, bipartisan, unifying, e pluribus unum. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Speaker Pelosi. Thank you.